Well, hey there, welcome into this Adobe Illustrator video brought to you as always by tutvid.com. If you're new around here, my name is Nathaniel Dodson, and today we are going to take a look at creating this really cool swamp poster effect inspired by a really cool piece of artwork I saw on Behance. You got to check this artist out. I got their link down in the bio. She's an incredible artist and has some really awesome stuff on her website, on Instagram. Go follow her on Instagram, show her some serious love. She's got a lot of cool stuff. That's all I can say. We're going to take a look at doing that. And today, this video, ladies and gentlemen, is brought to us by my good friends at squarespace.com. They're sponsoring the video. They show us a lot of love. They allow us to keep doing what we're doing here on the channel. So check them out. I got a link down in the bio for them as well. We'll talk a little bit more about Squarespace later, but they're giving us some free stuff and trial and all kinds of really cool stuff. So if you do feel so inclined or you need a website, absolutely check them out. They're really awesome. With that out of the way, let's jump into the video right now. Okie doke, the first thing we're going to do is do some document setup. So we'll go File, New, and we're going to create a new document, 2560 by 2560, just a perfect square. I just like this size. You can use any size you want, but we are going to be doing some kind of size-specific stuff. So if you're following along and you really want to do this, I'd recommend just going 2560 by 2560. And now that we have the document, I want to create a few color swatches, essentially establish the color palette for what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to go ahead and punch in a hexadecimal code over here in my color panel. Now, you can punch in the hex code when you're in the RGB viewing mode, and that you can use the flyout menu and choose RGB. I'm going to punch in, for starters here, 3F4A45. So 3F4A45. There's my first color. And now that I have that, I simply hit the new swatch icon. And here it is with those RGB values. Hit OK. And there's our first swatch right there. I'm going to hit the letter D just to restore sort of my original or default fill and stroke colors here. That also just jumps me right back to the RGB viewing mode. And here I'm going to go 2C4C40. So 2C4C40. And I am going to make this a swatch. I'm going to hit OK. Again, I'm going to hit D to get back to my defaults. I'm going to next punch in 4B, 5B, 55. And I'm going to hit the new swatch button here. So a lot of these kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, almost like dark aqua colors. Hit the letter D to get back to the defaults. Now we're going to go for a really dark color. This is going to be a 29302D. And I'm going to convert this to a swatch. Don't worry, we're almost done. Only, like 2 or 3 more swatches. We're going to hit the letter D to get back to our defaults. I'm going to go with another color here. This is 411A00. And I'm going to create a swatch now. Hit OK. This is more of like a brownish color, you can see. With the letter D to get back to the defaults, I'm going to go with a DCC35D. And then I'm going to hit the new swatch button here. And I'll hit OK. There we go. And then I believe the last color we want, hit the letter D to get back to our defaults. I am going to create the color, if I can select my hex code here, CC C78F. And this is just, it's very close to the last color, but not quite. And I'm going to hit OK. So I'm just going to move my swatches over here, and we'll kick this whole thing off by creating a rectangle. So I'm going to select my rectangle tool, click a single time, and I want this to be the size of my document. So 2560 by 2560, and hit OK. Now, a couple things. I'm going to grab my black arrow tool. This shape has a stroke on it, as you can see here, and it also has the wrong fill. So let's select it. Over here in the properties panel, we can select stroke. I won't actually select the stroke thumbnail, and I can just hit the little slash icon to get rid of the stroke. And then here in the fill, I can click on fill and I can choose from any of my colors. Now, I actually want this to be filled with a gradient. So I'm going to select the black to white gradient, and we're going to change our gradient. Let's open up our gradient panel by going Window and choose Gradient. And here it is. This is the black to white gradient we have applied. In my swatches panel, I'm going to drag the first 2 colors to these gradient stops. So I'm going to go with that color and then the slightly more saturated greener color right there. Move my swatches back over here just so they're a little out of our way. I'm going to set the angle of this gradient to 90 degrees. I want this to be going up and down, and I don't know if you can see the differentiation in color, but I want the more saturated green at the top, and I'm also going to kind of just constrain that green up closer to the top a bit more by dragging that gradient, well, they call it a gradient slider. It's more like a color constrained slider, just to force the greener colors up to stick closer to the top. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, we're going to go Window and open up our Align panel, and here in the Align panel, I'm going to choose to align to the artboard, and I'm going to align the horizontal and vertical centers just like that, so we get a nice shape. And you can see here we have our background of our swamp scene in place. Now let's create another rectangle. So grab the rectangle tool, click a single time. I want this to be 2560 wide, but I want the height to be only 650. I'm going to hit OK. And before I change the color of this, I am going to align it center and then align it to the bottom of the document down here. I'll slide this right up here, and I'm going to fill this color. I have it selected. You can see we have a gradient as our fill. I want this to be just a solid color, so I'm going to choose the solid color, and then the solid color I want is not the green. I want this sort of like more flat gray, blue-green color next to to it right there. And this is going to be sort of the swamp water, if you will. Now to make it look a little bit more like water, we're going to select this and we're going to duplicate it. So we'll go Edit Copy and then choose Edit Paste in Front. And now I am going to fill this with a gradient. So we'll go back to our gradient panel and I'm going to hit the little arrow there beside the gradient swatch or the gradient thumbnail, and I'm going to choose that default black-white gradient. And now from my swatches panel, I'm going to drag this really dark color right here. I'm going to drag it out and replace both color stops with that. In fact, I'm going to add a third color stop in the middle, and they're all going to be that same really, really dark color. What I'm going to do is begin with the color stop over here on the left, and I'm going to set it to an opacity of like 20%. I want it to be practically completely see-through, and I want the location to be right there at the starting line of 0%. In fact, to make this a little easier to see what we're doing, let's change the angle here to 90 degrees, so it's moving up and down for us. So we can see we just affected the color in the very foreground. Let's select the color stop in the middle here. I'll probably make sure this is set to about, I don't know, maybe 40. Maybe we'll push it back a little bit. Let's go with the opacity here, knock this down to 0 to make it completely disappear. And then let's go to the color all the way at the back here. And, you know, I think we'll leave that at 100. Maybe I'll just push that color back and force it to kind of hang around what will essentially be the horizon of our image just a little bit more. Now, I'm going to hide my swatches panel here just to clean up the workspace a little bit. And we are going to begin creating some depth in this image by creating a series of mountains. I could use the regular pen tool. I think to keep it easier, I'm just going to go with the curvature pen tool, but you could very well do this with the regular pen tool as well. I just want to make it a little more accessible for everybody. I am going to give my mountains a solid color. In fact, I'm going to go up here to HS, maybe I'll go to RGB actually, and I'm going to give them just random colors because we're going to be changing the colors pretty shortly. I'm going to begin with the curvature pen tool here, and I'm going to dip in for my little rolling hills / mountains, and I'm just going to make a series of bumps that kind of roll across the document like this. You can see we just, you know, create something that looks sort of like that. Now I'm going to Alt or Option click that last point. That's going to allow me to drag this sort of straight point out around, and I'm going to also hold down Alt or Option when I join my path together at the end. So we've created this bizarre shape that looks totally out of place. We can take this layer here in the Layers panel and drag it beneath the water. All right, well, let's take a quick break from what we're working on here. I want to give Squarespace a quick plug for sponsoring this video. They've got a system that allows you to easily build the most beautiful and easy-to-use websites out there. You'll have your new website up and running in no time flat. If you want a portfolio, a blog, or a full e-commerce store, you can do it quickly and easily with Squarespace. I built my own personal photography site on Squarespace. I've had it for years. I love it. It's fast. It's mobile friendly. It's just so easy to update. Check out squarespace.com/tutvid. That's TUTVID. Or click the link in the bio of this video for your free trial. No credit card required. And if you decide to launch your website, use the code TUTVID. Again, TUTVID to save 10% on your first website. Again, guys, check them out. Show them a little love for supporting this channel and helping me make these videos. Thank you, Squarespace. We love you quite a bit. Let's get back into the video. Let's go ahead and deselect this, grab the black arrow, deselect, and let's choose another fill color, maybe a green. Again, this is just for the sake of being able to work with this and really see what's going on. Let's start up a little bit higher, and let's create another sort of mountain / hill, I guess is really what I'm looking for here. We're creating some hills, and I'll just roll right through here, create what I want, you know, something that looks interesting and cool to me. There we go, that's neat. And then I'm going to Option click and just drag my path all the way around, and again, Option or Alt click to join the path off. Now, again, it looks really bad because it's on top of everything. Let's drag this below everything, and there we go. We have sort of our second row of mountains, and at this point, you can start trying to envision what it would look like, and if it's not quite what you're thinking, you can always move it around a little bit. So I could say, you know what, I want to actually stretch this out. I want these hills to be offset a little bit more. Maybe I want to nudge it back some, bump it down. You could tilt it, of course. You can really do whatever you want. It's your artwork. So there we go. Something like that will work for our second row of mountains. I like it. And next, we're going to create sort of some taller mountains in the back. And I'm going to do that by, I'll start right around maybe here. And we're going to swoop up sort of and hit our first peak. And then I'll dip it way down. Let's bring this down around this way. Come back for a peak here. And then we're going to dip way below our horizon, maybe down around here. And then we'll come way up over here. Maybe we'll place a sort of mountaintop there. I think something like that works. And then I'll dip right through here, maybe make another bump on the way out the door. Something kind of like that. And I'm going to place another point here because this second point, you can see it still has control of sort of shaping that last bit of mountain. And then I can just go ahead and just draw my shape all the way around. We didn't give this a different color, but I'll fix that in a second. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and just join that last path off. And let's give this maybe like a bluish color. And let's drag this all the way to the bottom. So there we go. So now we sort of have this series of mountains that don't really look much like mountains because, well, they're all solid colors and there's nothing about them that's moody or nice looking or anything like that. Maybe I'll stretch these mountains out a little bit. What we want to do, first of all, is get rid of all this color junk around them. There's a really cool trick we can use to do this. Let's just grab our backgrounds just like that. We can select it hitting the little circle in the layers panel, and we can copy it, edit copy, and then we will go edit paste in front, which will paste it right in place. You can see we have 2 copies of it. Let's move this all the way up to the top above our bits of mountain stuff, and then I'm going to hold down shift and select all of the mountains we just created. So I've got the new rectangle selected as well as all 3 pieces of mountain, and I'm going to go to my Pathfinder panel, and I'm going to hit the crop option. That's going to immediately trim all the mountains within that rectangle, or that, in this case, a square, but Illustrator knows it as a rectangle. Now, they've all been grouped up. I don't necessarily want them grouped up, so I'm going to go Object, Ungroup, and I can take a look at what we've got. So we've got this path here, which I don't think we need that. That's just junk that's kind of left over, so I can, well, I don't want to shut it off. I'm going to select that, and I'll just go ahead and delete it. And then I've got 2 pieces of blue, which are those mountains in the back. That's great. I've got the green mountains in the foreground and the tan mountains in the real foreground. Now that we've got our mountains, there's a couple things we want to do. It'll probably be a good idea to lock up the rest of our layers, so we can just lock up our background rectangle, the swamp water, and sort of the shine that we've added to the swamp water. This way we can just very quickly grab all those shapes, and they are just going to be our mountain shapes that we're grabbing. The reason I want to do that is because I want to apply a gradient to all these shapes. So let's hit that arrow, apply just our standard black to white gradient. I'm going to set it to 90 degrees. And you can see it looks really bizarre because it's kind of adding the gradient to all the shapes at once. That's fine. We're just getting kind of multiple things done at the same time. I'm going to open up my swatches panel once more, Windows Swatches. And what I want to do here is use that darkest of sort of green teal colors and replace both color swatches here in this gradient. And then for the color swatch on the far left, I'm just going to reduce the opacity to 0. Okay, now that we've done that, I can close swatches again. I'll probably be opening it up any minute again. And I'm going to select these shapes one by one and now begin customizing the gradient a little bit. So I'll say, you know what, I really want to push the sort of dark color, keep it really locked up there in the top portion of this shape a little bit more. I'll select the second row of hills, and I'll probably do the same thing in terms of, you know, really, you can show your color, but I want you to kind of hang in the peaks and stuff of the mountains. And if you need, you can always grab the gradient tool and you can drag the gradient out in the direction that you would like it to go and really affect some serious change in terms of how the gradient is used within the shape. Maybe something like that. And always deselect, check to see what it looks like. You can see how it's given it like this moody, misty feel. I really actually kind of like what it's done here to my mountains. It's really done some nice things to that. Maybe I'll take the gradient tool still and just try to maybe put it on a slight angle, something like that. And then I'll grab this shape here. We'll grab the gradient tool again, and I'll put this also on, you know, just a little bit of an angle. You can see what we've got. Maybe I'll stretch the dark color down the mountain a little bit there. And you can see we really build out some depth into our scene by using this technique. Now, armed with this depth, well, first of all, lock these layers up so we don't move them or destroy them or mess them up in any way. I'm going to begin adding some trees to the scene, and then we're going to add a cabin and some other cool stuff, and we're going to do some neat stuff here. So I'll grab the rounded rectangle tool here, and I'm going to zoom in. I just want to create some pretty small, sort of pill-shaped rounded rectangles. You can click a single time and just make sure that your corner radius is something obscenely high. Something like 100's fine. What I want to do is drag out a small rectangle. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to fill this with a black to black gradient. So I'm going to go just black to white. I'm going to select the black color stop, and I'm going to specify I want dark black there. And then I'm going to select the white stop, and I'm also going to say, yeah, give me dark black there. And on this color stop down here, I'm going to set the opacity to 0. So we're going to get this kind of effect where the tree is sort of also appearing out of the misty fog. Let's go ahead and Alt or Option drag out a copy of this. I am not going to constrain my proportions. I just want to affect the width here. We're going to make the little trunk of the tree. I'm going to make it about 9 pixels wide. You can see we just get a nice little stick here. And I can apply this, just stick it in the middle of the tree, just like that. I'll select that. And what I want to do is I kind of want it to look like it is just obviously fading right into the swamp water, but maybe it's going too far below the horizon. So I'll select that shape, and I'll say, you know what, you transparent part of the gradient, take over more of my shape. There we go, something like that. So what I'll do now is I'll shift click both of these shapes. You can see just 2 rounded rectangles in our layers panel, and I'm going to go Object Group. And there we go, we've grouped this up, and we now have our first tree. What I'm going to do is I am going to copy out a total of 14 trees and just scatter them across my horizon in a somewhat random manner. And with them in place, I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to begin customizing. So you can see it's just a bunch of groups we've created here in our layers panel. This also, by the way, is a very important step to have all of your other artwork locked up, because what we're going to do is we'll select one sort of tree at a time. We'll use our direct selection tool, and I'm going to drag a selection over all the bottom points of the tree part of this rounded rectangle. Now with the direct selection tool, we've selected both the vertical paths here as well. So if you drag a selection over the bottom, you want to hold down the shift key and drag another selection over just those vertical paths of the stem or the trunk part of our tree, and it will deselect those paths. So now we can just nudge and change the size of our tree, the shape of the top of our tree. And what will be nice about this is we can just click with the direct selection tool to select that entire path. The reason we're using direct selection, by the way, is because these shapes are within groups. So if we use the regular selection tool and we try moving this stuff around, it's going to turn into a mess real fast because it wants to select everything, both shapes. Now that we have a smaller tree, we can just put this, move it in place. Maybe what I can do is I can select the trunk of the tree and say, you know what, we need even more transparency there in this tree trunk. Something like that works better. And I'm just going to go over all of these trees, and I'm going to make some of them taller. I'm going to make some of them shorter. And we're just going to have some fun with this and create a series of random trees that are going to look good for us in our artwork here. And there, I think we have a nice line of trees added to our swamp scene. What we'll do at this point is grab all these trees by just dragging a selection over them all with the black arrow, the main selection tool, and we'll go Object Group. And then I can nudge them this way or that way. So I think I'm just going to nudge them over this way a little bit because we kind of want our cabin to be sitting right beautifully in the center of our scene here. Remember, I did make all of these trees this black to transparent black gradient, and I did that because I want them to kind of interact with the scene and be a little see-through. I'm going to try setting the blend mode. I've selected the entire group of trees. I'm going to try setting that to a blend mode of like soft light and see what that looks like. I like that. That's using the black and just all it's doing is darkening a lot, but darkening that teal color we have in the background. So the trees now just look like they fit right in. They're just nice, dark little trees sticking out of our swamp. Now, I mentioned a cabin a second ago. Let's zoom in and begin the creation of this cabin here. We're going to grab our regular rectangle tool. I've kind of written down the size that I want the cabin to be, so I'm going to go with this. I'm going to click once for the rectangle. I'm going to go 195 by 15 for sort of the platform upon which our cabin will sit. Remember, this is going to look like a cabin sitting on a platform that has like posts going down into the swamp. And then I'm going to select my rectangle again. I'm going to click a single time, and I'm going to say, give me one rectangle that is 70 by 45 pixels. This is going to sort of be the front of the house. I'm going to set this over here. In fact, I'm going to give this just kind of like a red color. I'm going to grab the rectangle tool again. I'm going to click a single time. I'm going to go with a 100 by 120 pixel piece of the house, and this is going to be the left wall. So I'm going to set this over here. We'll worry about aligning everything in a second. I'll color this with kind of an orangey yellow color. We can select the little platform and nudge it over. But again, alignment and getting everything perfectly lined up, we'll do that in a moment. I'm going to grab the rectangle tool again. I'm going to click, and I'm going to create a 15 by 25 pixel little rectangle here. And this will be the posts that stick out of the bottom of our platform into the swamp. So I'm going to drag these across the bottom of the platform like that. Now we're going to begin creating the roof. I know it doesn't look a lot like a home yet, but hang with me. We're going to get there. I'm going to go with this rectangle. Now this one has to be a very specific size. We're going to go 92 wide by 82 high. I'm going to hit OK, and I'll color this before I do anything else so I don't forget about coloring it. And then I'm going to go Object, Transform, and I'm going to choose Shear. Now here my settings are kind of set because I was messing around with this before. We're going to go with a shear angle of -32 degrees on the horizontal axis, and I've got preview checked on so I can see what's happening. I'm going to hit OK. Now what I want to do with this, I'm going to zoom in. I want to drag this down. Actually, before I do that, let's take these shapes here. Let's select them both. Let's go to our Align panel. Make sure we're aligning to selection, and we're just going to align the bottoms together just so they're nicely put together. And we can see that the shapes they're lining up nicely. I'm going to select them both, and we'll sort of, I don't know, by eye, try to center them with the platform here. There we go, and maybe I'll nudge them down one so they're kind of sitting on the platform. You can see they overlap the platform a little bit. Don't worry about that. That's going to be a matter of just changing the arrangement of these layers. In fact, I'm going to select the platform. I'm going to make it maybe pink so we can see it and differentiate it from our little poles down here. These poles, I'm going to shift select them all. I'm going to nudge them upward a little bit. Maybe that's a little too much. Now, these obviously should be behind the platform, but again, we'll get to that in a second. What I want to do is grab the roof. now that I have this stuff sort of in place, I'm going to grab the roof and I want to align the bottom right corner with the bottom right corner of this rectangle. So I'm going to bring it down, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, as long as it's close, that's probably good enough. Now I'm going to nudge it upward by holding Shift and tapping the up arrow key 1, 2, 3 times, and maybe I'll go like, I don't know, tap it a couple pixels more, and then I'm going to nudge it to the right another 3 times while holding Shift. So I'm going to go Shift 1, 2, 3. So there we go. Now that roof is in place, you can sort of see how we're going to have that visual overhang. That's kind of cool. I dig it. I like it. Next, we'll select this piece of the roof because we're actually going to flip it over. So we're going to go Effect, Distort and Transform, and choose Transform. And here what I'm going to do is I'm, number one, going to turn Preview on. I'm going to create one copy because we don't want to get rid of the front side of the roof. We just need to create the back side of it as well. I'm going to reflect it along the X. You can see there's the second copy appearing. And I'm going to move it horizontally. Now, my anchor should be the very center anchor point. That's kind of important for this little horizontal move. I want to move it the width of my shape. Now, I can see here in my transform section that the width of the shape is 153.791. So that's what I want to do, but I want to do it in the negative so it moves it back against the x-axis. So we're going to say negative 153.791. If we didn't put the negative, all it would do is it would move it 153 pixels to the right instead of to the left. So you can see how that just moves it right over. That looks pretty good. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. Well, number one, when you apply this kind of effect, notice how Illustrator's like not even acknowledging that the path exists, because when we select that whole layer, it only wraps our original path with a selection. That's because technically it's not a path, it's just an appearance that's been added to this path. We want to make it a path, however, so we're going to go Object, Expand that appearance, give me the path, and furthermore, we're going to go Object and say Ungroup. I want to split the front roof from the back roof of our little house. I'm going to drag the back roof on top just so I can see what I'm working with here. I'll deselect, just select the back roof of the house. Let's give it a color that stands out here. Maybe like maybe we'll go with like a really rich pink. Now with the pink side of the roof selected, we're going to go Edit Copy. We're going to say Edit Paste in Front, and I'm going to simply nudge it to the right once by holding down Shift and hitting the right arrow key. So that bumps it to the right about 10 pixels. I can change the brightness or something of the second piece of the roof just so we can see the differentiation between those two shapes. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's still not really looking like a house. Don't worry, we're getting there. We're creating all the very rough shapes. Now, I'm going to grab the rectangle tool. We're going to create the chimney, and then we're going to be cutting this thing up and making it look like a little house. I'm going to click once, and I'm going to add a 9 by 30 rectangle here. And you know what, I don't know, it's kind of right around where I would want it to be, maybe somewhere right around there. And I will choose my rectangle tool, click a single time, and I'm going to add a 12 by 30 rectangle. And we'll just put these right together. Try to get them as close as possible. Nudge them with the arrow keys if you have to. The reason that I'm doing two individual shapes is because I want there to be a shadow side and a light side of the chimney, just to also give the chimney some shape. And really, at this point, we can begin arranging all of our shapes to make them look a little bit more like they should. So let's begin with the chimney here, and what we're going to do with this is bump it down in the layer stack. I'm going to collapse my properties panel for a second so we can watch this happen. You can go Object, Arrange, and just say, look, send backward or bring forward. And the hotkey is Command, this would be Control on the PC, and the left or right bracket key. So I want to be sending this backwards, so I'm going to be hitting the left bracket key. So with both these layers selected, you can watch it happen in the Layers panel here. Command and the left bracket key, we bump it down, and there we go. We just need to get it behind our roof, and that looks more like it should. Same thing here with the back side of the roof. I'm going to select both of these. We want these to be behind the front side of the roof. So I'm going to nudge them down. There we go. That's all we need to do, something like that. I want to bring my platform here. I want to bring it up in front of almost everything. So I'm just going to begin bumping it up, make sure it's in front of everything, primarily the poles that are going to stick down into the swamp and also the front sides of our little house. There we go. And you can see even just by arranging it properly, you're starting to kind of get the idea of where we're going with our effect here. Okay, let's go ahead and grab both left pieces of roof, and we're going to use the Pathfinder panel here, and we're going to just say, hey, look, divide this. And it's going to group both of these shapes together. We're going to say Object, Ungroup, and it's split it into a bunch of paths. Well, we don't need the big piece in the middle, and we don't need the hot pink piece hanging out over there. We just need this one piece left as sort of the back edge of our house. Next, we'll select that little piece that's left, and we will shift-click the big orange left side of the house, and we'll do the same game, the little divide Pathfinder. Again, Object, Ungroup, And here what I want to do is, well, I can't really delete any parts of the orange yet, but I want to make sure I select both pieces of the pink here and just rejoin them. So I'm going to go Pathfinder, and I'm just going to say unite those two shapes together. It might seem like we did nothing, but you can see we cut this perfect channel through that side of our house, essentially giving us a perfect angular edge of our house right over there. So I'm going to turn that piece of the house back on. Now, of course, we want to select the front side of the roof and that left side of the house, and we'll do that divide game again. And here I can go Object, ungroup these, and now what I can do is grab the top chunk of the orange left side of the house, delete it, and again, our house shape is really coming into form here. Now you can see we got a whole bunch of teal pieces left over. We got a little tiny piece up there. We're going to shift select all 4 of these shapes, just like that, and we're going to unite them together because that should be one big piece. Maybe one thing I should do here is just color one side of the chimney a little bit differently, just so we can see what's going on. Now, one thing I do need to do, I need to finish creating the underhang, sort of it's not really a soffit, I'm not sure what it's called, the undercarriage of the back side of the roof. I'm going to grab my pen tool, and we're going to go View and make sure Smart Guides is turned on. And what we can do is line up exactly on top of that anchor point. Hold down Shift, draw a straight line across, and just create a nice shape just like that. I'm going to select that shape. I'm going to grab my eyedropper tool. I'm going to sample the exact pink, so it's the same exact pink. And we can just Shift select both these shapes and unite them together. So, I'm sorry, not divide. We're going to go Unite to create that shape as we see fit. Now, one thing that needs to happen is this needs to move behind both the front part of the roof and this side wall. So we'll just hold down Command or Control, left bracket key, just like that. And we can see we've got this nice little effect where we have the back side of our roof looking as it should. Okay, last but not least, we need to add a window and a window to the front and a door to the front of our little house as well. So let's grab the ellipse tool, and I'm just going to drag out a nice little circle. I'm going to open my properties panel. It should be about 20. There we go. I landed right on 25. 25 by 25 is what I wanted, and I just happened to get it. I'm going to nudge it over. I want it to sit about the middle but lower on this left side of our house. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and we're going to drag a little window here into the front side of the house. I'll nudge it over just a little bit, sort of like that. And then I'm going to Option drag this over to just copy that shape. I think it's a little bit too wide, actually. So I'm going to select that here in the properties panel. I'm going to say, you know what, I don't want 22 wide. Let's go like 18 wide, something like that. That might work for us. We'll nudge it over. And then I'm going to Option drag a copy of this over, and this will be the door. So I'll just pull this straight down. Now you can see this being the door, we don't want it to overlap with our platform. So again, we could drop the door down, but I think the better option would be to just bring the platform up. So the platform is right here in our layer stack. I can just click the circle to select it and just Command or Control and the right square bracket key and just bring it up until everything is kind of looking the way it should. So at this point, we're going to create the brown to beige gradient that is going to colorize this entire house. One gradient is going to colorize this entire house, and it's going to look good. So what we'll do is I'll grab the gradient panel, and we're going to begin by creating a custom gradient. We'll probably just save it as a swatch to keep things moving fast, but maybe we could just use the eyedropper tool. I don't know. Let's go a window, open up the swatches panel, and what I'm going to do here is create a dark brown to beige gradient. And what I would do is just drag this gradient swatch into my swatches panel. And you can see, there we go. We've saved our gradient. I can close my swatches panel, and I'm just going to select, you know what? We can just select all the shapes like we did before. And we can go into the swatches panel by hitting the fill up here in our properties panel and just select that brown to beige gradient that we just created. And it applies it to everything. Now, does this look good? Absolutely not. But we need to make some changes here. So let's begin. I guess we'll just begin with the chimney since that's up there on top. I think the easiest thing to do is going to be use the gradient tool. So this is going to be the dark side of the gradient. Now, because I put the dark color on the left side of the gradient, where I begin dragging, that's going to be the dark side. So I really just want to utilize maybe like the top 1/8 of this gradient for the chimney. So I'm going to click and drag like this. So we just get a very dark brown with just a slight gradation. Now this side of the chimney is going to be the light side of the chimney. So I'm going to grab the gradient tool, and I'm going to this time drag straight upward. This time utilizing the much lighter side of my gradient. If I want to change the gradient a little, I can always just drag it, make that the sort of highlight side of the chimney a little darker. darker. Great. Let's go ahead. We'll grab the back side of the house here. I'm going to grab the gradient tool once more. Now, we want it to be a little bit darker down here at the bottom, kind of like it is, but it's just a little bit too dark. The range of color is too drastic. So let's begin with the dark like way out here and bring the light way out over there. So it's definitely darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. Maybe we want it to be a little bit darker than that at the bottom. Let's go with something. Yeah, let's try that. That looks good. Let's select the front side of the house. Now, the front side of the house should be very light. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. We're going to put the dark way out here and just come across the roof. So the bottom right corner of the roof is a little bit darker, but not much darker. All things considered, the roof of our little house is going to be pretty bright. Now, the left side of the house, this again is the shadow side. We've chosen the left side of the chimney to be the shadow side. So the left side of the house should be the shadow side of the house as well. So we're going to grab our gradient. We're going to go dark for this side of the house. So I'm going to say, look, I want a lot of darks there on that side of the house. There should be some natural shadow happening up near the top part because of this little overhang of the roof anyway. Let's grab the front of the house. And also here, there should be some shadowing, not as drastically, like it shouldn't be as dark overall as that side of the house, but there still should definitely be some shadow happening. I think that's pretty good. I'll probably have to come in here and tweak the gradient a little bit, but we can always do that. Point is, we do want there to be some shadow from that roof overhang, which is there. For the platform here, I think I'm just gonna like try setting it to 90 degrees, something like that. Maybe let's go put the dark at the top. Let's go -90, something like that. That looks good. And then for the 3 platforms here, I'm going to expand, or I'm going to rotate this. I want it to be darker at the top and lighter at the bottom. So I'm going to go something like that. Maybe that's a little bit too far up. So I'll begin there maybe and drag down to like there. Ooh, still I think too far. Let's try maybe there to there. I think something like that works a lot better. Again, just remember the platform should cast a little bit of a shadow theoretically on those poles. All right, and before we get to the windows, I want to tweak a couple gradients. So I'm going to select the left side of the house. I'm going to expand that brown a little bit more. Maybe I'll pinch the beige up into it a little bit just to give a little brightness at the bottom, but I really want that heavy brown to dominate that side of the house. The front of the house, like I said, we'll maybe constrain the shadow a little bit more, but move it forward just a touch so it can really just kind of hang up under what would be that overhang. So something like that I think works a little better. For the front of the house, I might just make the light beige color a little bit more dominant. Let's lighten that up. The front side of the chimney, I might want to make that just a touch brighter so I can adjust the gradient there. And for the back side of the roof, I think I want to just chill out the darker end of the gradient. That's what I'm trying to say. I want to do that because I don't want it to be darker than the shadow that it's casting on that left side of the house. So I'll admit still looks kind of bad because the windows and the door look really bad. Also, this gradient, I think the dark is a little bit too much. Let's start the dark up here and move down. Yeah, I think something like that's going to be a lot better. Let's just kind of chill it out a little bit. Yeah, something like that. A little more subtle, a little more beautiful. All right, so for this little shape here on the side of the house, I think what I'm going to do is just make a black to black gradient. So we're going to go with the standard black gradient. I'm going to select the black color stop, give me full black, and then I'll select the white stop and say give me full black. And I'm going to take one of these color stops and just set the opacity to 0, something like that. I'm going to zoom in here on this. I'm going to select it again, and we can use our gradient tool. I think I'm just going to kind of manually do this. Let's go -45 and see where that puts us. Nope, I think we might need to go +45 or 135. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. And because this is black, we'll kind of utilize the same trick we utilized with the trees where we set it to the blend mode of soft to light. And that way it essentially becomes a really dark brown and just sort of suggests that, yeah, there's a shadow there. Let's maybe crunch the black. I kind of want to make the black end of the shadow very heavy to make it look a little bit more like a natural window opening. So instead of being just a smooth, perfect gradient. All right, I like that. I'll select the window here, and I want that same exact gradient. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper tool. I'm going to say, yep, give me that black to black gradient, and I'm going to set this to the angle of 135, and I'm also going to set this little square to soft light. You know what? I want there to be a lot more black here in this front window. Let's maybe do something more like that. I like that. And we will grab our door, and I'm going to do kind of the same thing here with the door. And here with the door, we'll set the angle to 90 degrees, and I think I'm going to get rid of that color stop. I do want the majority of the doorway to be really dark. Let's set this to soft light. Now, I'm having a little bit of an issue here as I'm looking at this. I really want the window and door on the front of the building to be darker. So I could try taking this and setting it to like multiply, but that's still going to give me that solid black. I bet you what I'm going to have to do is use that same brown gradient. So if I sample like the dark brown off the side of the building and I set it to -90 instead of 90 and just expand the dark brown part of it and set this to the multiply blend mode, Now we're cooking with fire. That's kind of what I want. So I'll quickly select the window and grab the eyedropper tool, sample that. I can rotate that a little bit. What I'm going to do, it's putting the dark color in the bottom front corner. So instead of working with the angle, I'm just going to hit the quick reverse gradient button. There we go. And I really don't want there to be a lot of light stuff here. I definitely want this to be dark. Now it looks bad. Why? Because we still have the soft light and not the multiply blend mode. There we go. And now in fact that's just too dark. We want to bring back some of that lighter brown, show that some love. There we go, something like that. And I'm kind of tempted to try the same thing here on the side of the house. So I'm just going to go ahead and sample that gradient and set the blend mode to multiply. I think that might be the better way to go with the window and the door, or the windows and the door. I kind of like that. So we've created the cabin. We're going to just select this, and I'm going to group it all together, Object Group. And the one thing I want to do is make sure I align the bottom of the platform with the horizon. It kind of looks like I kind of did that already. But that's the positioning that I'm choosing, the bottom of the platform with the surface of our swamp water. So now we'll create the reflection stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and select the group of trees, and we'll probably use that same transform trick that we were using before. Let's go Effect and just choose to reopen the transform panel, not apply transform, reopen the transform panel. And I am going to say, nope, we don't want to move this on the horizontal. We're going to preview this real quick. I don't want to reflect the X. I want to reflect the Y, and I want to push it straight down. So let's go vertical and bump it down, and just keep bumping it down until it looks about where we want it to be. Maybe something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. About 120 pixels for my image works, or my illustration works. I'm going to hit OK. And I do want to turn this into editable artwork. So I'm going to go Object, Expand the Appearance. And now this is one giant group, but we can go Object, Ungroup, because it's actually just grouping two groups. So it's preserved our original group of trees, and now we have the group of upright trees and the group of upside down trees. So with the group that's holding those together, we're going to go Object, Ungroup, and with the group of trees that's upside down, we'll now just go in and, I don't know, we'll set the opacity to something like 25%, something like that, to just reflect them nicely on the surface of our swamp, and maybe even in the transparency panel. Let's double click here to add a layer mask, unclip it, grab the rectangle tool, drag a nice little rectangle out over it. We're going to go with the sort of default black to white gradient, and we're just going to look to fade off the tips of these trees a little bit. So I'm going to grab my gradient tool here, and remember, I'm going to be dragging from the left side of the gradient, so we're going to start with the white. So I'll say, let's go white to black right about there. And then we'll select our black point, make sure it's true black, and that's going to fade the tips of the trees off nicely. Let's go ahead and copy this rectangle, because we're going to use the mask for the cabin as well. So let's go Edit, Copy. And there we go. We have it copied to our clipboard. Now just select the artwork thumbnail in your transparency panel, and we're back to editing artwork. Looks good. We got our trees reflecting in the swamp. Let's do the same for our cabin. We can select that. Let's go Effect, Transform. We'll play that same game where we just preview it. Now this one has to be moved vertically more than 120 pixels, so let's move it down, 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 kind of until it's, where it looks like it sort of should be. Let's hit OK. Again, Object, Expand Appearance. We now have both groups, the upright house and the upside down house in there. We want to ungroup that, Object, Ungroup. Select the bottom house. Reduce the opacity to 25%. Maybe for this one we'll make it a little stronger. Let's go 30% for this. Add the mask, unclip, and now we can just go Edit, and just choose Paste in Front, and it'll paste that same mask right in place. And maybe I want to fade away the top of the house a little stronger, something like that. That looks good. I'll bump the black back a little bit. There we go. Something sort of like that. Select the artwork thumbnail in the transparency panel to get back to normal editing mode. And you can see we have our trees, we have our house. Things are looking good. Okay, we're going to go ahead and lock up those layers that we just created, so we don't move them, so we don't adjust them, so we don't change them in any way that we don't want to. And I am going to go and drag in a sketch that I made loosely based upon the original artist's rendition of the smoke with the skull head in it, because it's just part of the scene, right? It's the creepy swamp skull smokehouse. And I'm going to quickly trace this out. I'm going to ignore the eyes and the nose for a second. We're going to do that later. What I would recommend you do, I like going and pencil drawing, so you can do that, or you can just trace out whatever you like here in Illustrator. But essentially, I'm just going to use the pen tool, and you can see me going through and just tracing out this smoke as I see fit, and the bits of the smoke that I like and don't like. I also just make sure that I'm drawing with a stroke and not a fill there. I change that. And you can just go through and edit it as you see fit, creating the skull that hovers over the swamp. Now that I've got my rough version of the smoke, I can delete that sketch file. Here's just the outline of my smoke. Now, what I can do is just quickly deselect it, look to see if there's any points that look like they definitely need to be adjusted. Maybe this over here could be adjusted, could be smoothed out a little bit more, something like that. So you can go over your smoke really quickly. It does not at all have to look perfect at this point. Just has to be a rough shape. I'm going to flip fill and stroke. So I've got a big black blob now, and I'm going to size this down holding Shift and Option. That's Shift and Alt on the PC. I'm going to move it roughly into place. I want this to be pretty big, so something like that. I want it to kind of dominate the skyline, so to speak. Now, you can see that when I move it into place, I'm mostly concerned about this up here, which is going to become the skull's head. I want that to be in place. I can adjust how the smoke meets the house anytime I want. So I'm going to zoom in, and the first thing we'll do is chop off the bottom of our shape. We'll do that by grabbing the rectangle tool and just saying, look, this whole bit here, we're going to slice that. So click on this shape and hold down Shift and select the smoke. And just choose the minus front pathfinder option here in your properties panel. So there we go. We just sliced that right off. Now I can just grab my direct selection tool. I'm going to zoom in here. And by the way, I have smart guides turned on. This helps. Also snap to point. That makes this possible. So direct selection tool, and just grab this point and drag it over, and it'll snap to the point on the left side of the chimney. Grab this side of the smoke, and it'll snap to the point on the right side of the chimney. And then you can look. It's going to tweak and adjust your shape a little bit. And if you think, you know what, it absolutely needs to be changed a little bit, you can always go in there and adjust the tangent handles just like that. Nobody said you have to stick with the original. So you can go in there and just clean things up a little bit, maybe make it a little smoother if it needs to be. Something like that. And there we go. I have my shape. Maybe I'll just stretch this part out a little bit. And I have my smoke for my cabin. Of course, we need to colorize it properly. Let's grab our regular selection tool. I'm going to select the smoke. We're going to fill it with a gradient. So I'm going to just click on the standard black to white gradient option. But I am going to go window swatches, because remember, we specifically created a swatch way back at the beginning of this tutorial for the smoke. I'm going to make both color swatches for the smoke, that sort of beige, greenish beige color that I have. But I'm going to take one of these two swatches and just reduce the opacity to 20%. Then what I'm going to do is take the gradient tool. I'm going to say, you know what, let's try making the gradient move a bit like that. That actually, I kind of like that. I'll push more transparency into the middle. Maybe I'll add another color stop here and boost the opacity back up, so the smoke, as it's coming out of the chimney, actually is kind of thick, and it sort of fades and chills out a little bit as it gets toward the middle of our gradient. Maybe this shouldn't quite be 70%, maybe like 40 or 50. Let's try 50, something like that. And you can see, I don't know, just, you play with it and get kind of some smoke that looks sort of half decent. And now we have our smoke here on top of everything. I am going to create the skull, eyes, and nose. We're going to begin creating the nose. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the star tool. Now, this doesn't make a lot of sense, but when you use the star tool, you can create triangles. So you probably see this when you drag out the star tool. But as you're dragging, you can use your up and down arrow keys to add or remove points from the star. So I'm just going to remove all the points till I just have a triangle. Hold down Shift so the point of the triangle sticks up, and I'm just going to drag out a triangle just like that. I don't care about the size, not right now at least. I'm going to look to my properties panel. I'm going to make sure I tick on constraining the proportions, and I'm just going to set the width of my triangle to 200 pixels. So there we go. It's a giant triangle in the middle of our plume of smoke, and we can always resize this a little bit later, but let's just go with this, and we'll resize everything to look great in a minute. Hold down the Command or Control key, and you'll get these little dots that appear in the corners of your triangle. Pull them back and round the corners of your triangle, like round them a lot. Then grab the direct selection arrow, and I'm going to grab the middle, or select the middle anchor point in the bottom of this triangle. Hold down Shift and nudge upward once, maybe twice, but I'm going to go once in this case. And then under my pen tool, if I click and hold my pen tool, I can grab the anchor point tool. Now here with the anchor point tool, I'll zoom in. I can click on this now very jagged, straight looking point. Click, drag straight to the left while holding Shift, and we can just round it out nicely. So we get a beautiful sort of rounded bottom of the nose. There we go. And I'm just going to fill this with any old color. So I want to make sure that I'm working with a solid color, so I can just come over here and select solid color. And we can just go with the color of the smoke. The color isn't going to matter. We're going to be using them in a different way here in just a second. Next, let's grab our ellipse tool, click once, and create a 200 by 200 ellipse. These are going to be the eyes of our skull. So I'm going to just create a couple of these. Now, the trick with the skull is that we don't want the eyes to be so high that the nose looks like a mouth. That just looks silly. It looks kind of like a ghoulish octopus. But if they're too low, it starts to look like an owl that's been studying in the library a little too long. Again, not necessarily something we want. You also have to contend with, if the eyes go too close together, you sort of get like this beady Angry Bird style effect, which beady cute eyes for the smoky swamp monster is not what we want. So you really have to kind of play and adjust the size and the spacing and everything to get it just right. Maybe you could even go find a photo of a skull and overlay your stuff over that skull to make sure your spacing is exactly the way it should be. I think this works for me. I'm going to shift select all three shapes, hold down shift and the option or alt key, and maybe make my skull features a little bit smaller, move them further down on his head, and I think that's about good. So I'm going to select all three of the shapes. I'm going to go edit, cut to remove them from my artboard, but copy them to my clipboard. I'm going to select my smoke, still looking beautiful coming out of my cabin. Go to the transparency panel here, and we're going to add a layer mask. So double click to add the mask. I'm going to unclip it, and we're just going to paste these shapes right into place. We're going to go edit, paste in front. Now, all we need to do, just fill these shapes with black, and it's going to punch those clean holes right in the middle of our smoke, just like that. We can select our artwork thumbnail there in the transparency panel, and that's looking pretty good. Now, there is one final step that we really want to make sure we do, and that is, first of all, lock the smoke up, create another rectangle. So we're going to click a single time. We're going to create this the size of our document, 2560 by 2560, and we'll go ahead and fill this with a solid color. I actually want this to be a 50% gray, so I'm going to set this to 128 across the board in the RGB settings. There we go, 128 across the board, and that's right about 50% gray. I think the hex code for 50% gray is actually 7F, 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 but we're very close. Close enough that I'm not worried. I'm going to go to the Align panel. Let's make sure we align to the artboard and just drop this right on top of everything, perfectly aligned, horizontal, verticals, and centers, and then go Effect, Artistic, Film Grain. Now, I have the film grain that I pretty much always use. It's a heavy 10 or 20 grain amount, highlight area of 0, and an intensity of 10. We're going to hit OK. And this is going to be an effect that we actually want to be able to see this grain. But the grain is also going to serve a very real purpose, because if I shut the grain off, you can sort of see in the gradient, we are getting some little banding and just stuff that does not look all that great. Grain helps alleviate and in fact eliminate banding. So we're going to just select this rectangle. We're going to set it to a blend mode of soft light, and I don't even want to touch the opacity. Because again, I want to see the grain. It's part of the effect that we have going on here. And there, ladies and gentlemen, you have the final finished effect, the creepy, smoky swamp skull coming out of our cabin, floating on top of this swamp. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. That is the entirety of the tutorial. It took a little bit of time, didn't it? But look at that final finished effect. Wow, wow, wow. If you got this far, if you created your own poster effect, I would absolutely love to see it. Upload it to Instagram, tag me in it. Make sure you go follow the artist who originally created this. Follow them on Instagram as well. Show them some love. You can go over there and interact with them as well. Maybe tag them in the artwork too, and just share it so the whole world can see it. It's really cool. I like to get in there and like and comment and mix it up with you a little bit if you've created this stuff. So for everything we covered in this video, from the gradients, the overabundance of gradients and grain and shapes and pathfinders and opacity, blend modes, masks, and so much more, ladies and gentlemen, for this one and everything else, that's it. Get it, got it, good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more great tutorials every day. Also, buy my course. It helps us do what we do, and this channel is supported by viewers just like you. You can also just click the thumbnail and watch another video from this channel. See you next time, guys.